That's what I was expecting, but we didn't get any of that. So yeah, good job. It's not OP, I guess.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the As Yet Unnamed podcast. Taku, and with me today is once again my lovely co-host John.
Hello.
Hello, John. Yeah, so we're on the third episode of the series looking at the new wave of pre-constructed decks. Have a look at the other videos in the series if you haven't already for the breakdown of the other two decks.
Yep, so today we'll be having a look at the Tzimisce deck. The description from the Black Chantry website goes, this deck is a versatile toolbox. Your vampires use mind-altering, dominate powers to gain influence and undermine opponents. In combat, they can turn into bats or mist to escape, or rework their bodies into monstrous forms to seriously wreck their foes. For defense, you rely on animals, spies, and hideous ghoul servants.
I'm not totally convinced this deck is a versatile toolbox. There's some versatility to in it. It is a toolbox, but it's also a bit confused, I think.
It is certainly a toolbox.
Anyway, once again, for those of us who are statistically inclined, this deck has 12 crypt cards, 12 vampires, 9 of which are the 9 unique vampires, and 3 unique titles, an average capacity of 6. 77 library cards, broken down into roughly 15% masters, 12% actions. There is 1 equipment in there. 6%, 5 to 6% allies, and 5 to 6% retainers. About 10% action modifiers, 10% combo cards, about 10% combat, and a whopping 27% reaction.
Yep, and I guess overall in the deck you have a total blood cost of 24 and a pool cost of 15, so there are some expensive tools in this toolbox.
Look, sometimes you just have to shell out for that diamond-tipped ankle grinder. Let's have a quick look at the new cards and notable reprints. Once again, this deck features an all-new crypt and 6 new library cards and a bunch of reprints. First up, we have Adreno
Manawara?
Yeah, close, I guess. So Adreno is a 8 capacity Tzimisce Group 6 Anarch Baron of Manau. He has inferior potence, superior animalism, superior dominate, and superior protein. Adreno gets 1 press, mandatory, each combat, and only usable to continue combat. Mandatory press, I feel, is both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, I think that there are enough, I guess, tools in this toolbox to make that mandatory press work in your favor.
Yeah, but regardless, it is something that you and your opponent both have to play around.
Yep.
Next vampire that we're spotlighting is Nazarian. Nazarian is a Tzimisce Group 6 capacity Anarch with inferior celerity, inferior protein, superior animalism, and superior dominate. While you control no locations, Nazarian gets -1 bleed. While you control 1 or more locations, Nazarian gets +1 both. They're not a very good vampire in the precon. I think you can build a pretty decent deck around him, but in the precon you only have 3 locations, and I think for them equipments are key.
Or I kind of like the art on this card. I like to think Nazarian refers to that tree on the right hand side, and that girl is just some random person having a stab.
You could be. Like, could be right. And then next up is Ranimira, Tzimisce, 6 capacity, Anarch Baron of Sophia. Inferior Dominate, Inferior Presence, Inferior Protean, and Superior Animalism. While you have 9 or fewer pool, Ranimira gets +1 intercept.
When you think about the other barons we've seen so far, this discipline spread is about par the course, right? For a 6-cap baron, you might get 1 superior and then the rest are inferior. So in that sense, it's not too bad a discipline spread with a solid built-in ability. But when you compare him to the rest of the crypt that you get in this deck, he is a bit patchy in terms of disciplines. The rest of the Anarchs in this particular deck have actually a pretty solid discipline set.
Now, if you've watched our previous video, John mentioned something along the lines of Anarchs being get away with not necessarily requiring superior disciplines where it matters. But I think Tzimisce does suffer from that a little bit. They're not your typical Anarch, per se. Not in that sense. Next card is Prentice Derby. It's not a particularly exciting card. It is your stock standard, 4 capacity Anarch with 3 inferior in-clan disciplines, namely Animalism, Dominate, and Protean. And the only reason why I picked up this card as a spotlight is his art reminds me of the angry meme boy face.
Okay.
There are a few more vampires in the deck, but we're going to have a look at the library cards instead. So first up is my preview card. Way back, wow, it's been a while now. Way back when?
Yeah.
I was given this card to preview on my channel. It's Invigorate, connection modifier that requires an Anarch. It's one of those Anarch 3-way discipline cards where you can use one of 3 disciplines to play it. At Animalism, Invigorate gives this Anarch +1 strength this action. At Dominate, this Anarch cannot be blocked by allies this action. And at Protean, this Anarch's hand strikes are aggravated for action. My original notes says I'm unconvinced though.
Still not convinced.
Yeah.
So one thing I've noticed, and we'll continue to talk about it throughout this episode, is one of the sticks that they've given Tzimisce is somehow combining increased strength with increased aggravated damage, which I'm not sure is a great stick. The great thing about aggravated damage is you only need to stick 1 through, and the rest is just kind of unnecessary. So yeah, so wait to see more of that.
Interestingly though, this is one of, I guess, few cards in the deck that actually gives you strength and aggravated damage for the entire action.
Or aggravated damage.
Sorry, or aggravated damage, yeah, for the entire action.
Yep, this is one of the cards which goes well with Adreno.
Yeah, Adreno.
Yeah, because he gets his press, so having +1 strength for 2 rounds, that's 4 damage right there, not too shabby.
Or 2 attempts to land your aggravated hand damage. Anyway, Monstrous Form. This is a card that requires Dominate and Protean. And it has 2 modes. First mode is a combat card. Inferior Dominate, Inferior Protean, only usable before range is determined. This vampire gets +1 strength this combat, and a vampire can only play 1 monstrous form each round. At Superior Dominate and Superior Protean, it's a +1 stealth action. Put this card on this vampire. During combat, you can lock this card to give this vampire +1 strength this round, or 1 maneuver or press. I had no notes on this card.
So similar to Invigorate, it gives you at inferior, +1 strength for the whole combat, so good with Adreno. But again, in a clan where you can be landing aggro strikes, I'm not sure what you're doing with increased strength.
You have got an interesting note here, though, is to compare it with Op plus IR goggles.
Yep. So that's where the superior comes in, right? You put it on the table and it sticks around. You get to use it over and over, in which case it becomes more comparable to equipment.
Yeah.
I think the strength option is probably the least desirable, but getting to choose between a maneuver or a press, probably solid.
Definitely better than having a maneuver or a press and not the other.
And the other neat thing is when I think of cards which give you options, right, like multiple play options, those cards normally come with a blood cost. Things like Fleetness or Old Friends or Perfect Paragon. The flexibility normally comes with a blood cost, but this one's kind of neat in that it doesn't. It's just free either way.
Also, I've just noticed reading the card text. Reading the card explains the card. Because of the way the card is worded, even if you had House of Sorrows, which allows you to unlock a red card, you can't use a single copy of Monstrous Form twice. Because of the way it's phrased during X to Y, you can only lock this once per combat, even if you unlock it. I'm not sure why that came up, but
Yep, no other thoughts on that.
yeah. Mind blank, no thoughts. Next up, Obedient Flesh. This is a action modifier or a combat card that requires Dominate and Protein. It has 1 blood cost, and at inferior Dominate and inferior Protein, it's an action modifier that gives you +1 stealth, and allies get -1 intercept. At superior Protein and superior Dominate, it is a combat card that's only usable before range is determined. This round, this vampire gets +1 strength, 1 optional maneuver, and can prevent 1 damage. A vampire can only play 1 Obedient Flesh each round. Do you think this is as, good as it looks on paper?
Oh, first off, is more increased strength. I don't know where they're going with this increased strength all over the place, but sure. It's primarily a stealth card, right? I don't think that the superior ability is the reason you're playing it. That could be considered a cycle option instead of something being worth playing in its own right. So, or a stealth option in Dominate Protean, that's fine. The fact that the so-called cycle option will be more relevant than, say, Form of the Serpent, I think that's worth mentioning.
And I just have to say that, art effect aside, I'm not a fan of this art style. I don't know why. I guess if you corner me in a dark alley and demanded that I provide some form of evidence as to why I don't like it, I still wouldn't be able to tell you why. But that's just me. It's neither here nor there. Next up, One with the Land. So this is a card that sparked a significant amount of interest when it first got previewed. Honestly, I haven't actually seen it in actual play, so remains to be seen how good or bad it is. Anyway, One with the Land is a reaction card that requires Tzimisce and Protein. It is only usable during an action directed at you or a card you control. At inferior Protein, it is +2 intercept. At superior Protein, it is only usable by a locked vampire. This vampire unlocks and attempts to block. If they block, neither combatant can strike during the first round of the resulting. I think at first glance, it is a replacement Eyes of Argus.
It's in my opinion, it's a great design in that when you look at old Tzimisce, the original discipline set, you only really had one way to play them, which was as a kind of animalism aspect wall, and vicissitude was just kind of a toolboxy combat option. So in that sense, a big part of the old Tzimisce's identity was I can play Eyes of Argus and Flick or Block. And this goes a long way in allowing or enabling the new Tzimisce to play in a similar way for those people who really liked that original playstyle. So yes, you still have a great wake option that can duplicate as intercept on the actions, and the extra bit about the no strikes, that's I don't know, that's just a bit weird to me, but sure.
I have a sneaking suspicion that during playtesting, they were probably looking at a way to say, okay, so how would Tzimisce, if you were to build a wallish deck, how would you deal with the Form of Mist? So this deals cleanly with Form of Mist, as you can somehow generate additional strikes or presses.
Yeah, additional strikes don't help.
Right. Reading the card. Yeah, the other thing is, even though strikes can't be played, you can still get away with environmental damage. So, well, when it was first previewed, a lot of the segment around it was, hey, I can still play Karen Crows or Weather Control if you can somehow squeeze a Blood Sorcery in there. But I think there is a case to be made to run Tzimisce with gold retainers. Probably easier to just run Murder of Crows, but I find it entertaining to be able to fire off an Ivory Bow or hand over a Rowan Ring.
Yeah, I like it.
And next up, second last of the new cards is Sculpt the Flesh. It is a combat card that requires Tzimisce and Protean. At inferior Protean, it is strike, hand strike, aggravated. At superior Protean, it's strike, hand strike at +1 damage, and put this card on the opposing minion. During their unlock phase, the attached minion burns 1 blood or life. Minions can burn this card as a +1 stealth action. Straight up, one of the things I really like is BCP has gone out of their way to, or at least someone in BCP has gone out of their way to stop using ambiguous text. So if you are familiar with the many cards in VtES, this would have said during their unlock phase, this minion burns 1 blood or life. And they've changed it to the attached minion. So it's clear. It's not the minion playing it, it is the minion that it's it. I like it.
One interesting to note, and I initially missed it, is the aggravated damage only comes at inferior. The superior hand strike, where you stick the card onto them, that hand strike's not aggravated, so that's interesting. At inferior, this card is about as good as Donnybrook. Take that as you will. I prefer my claws. But yeah, the superior option is the interesting one here, in my opinion. It's nice that it, in a way, gets through prevent. Even if they prevent the damage of the strike, they still get the card stuck on them. And, burning a blood every turn is not something you can live with for the rest of the game. You want to remove it at some point. So it's nice for sticking on predators because it kind of forces them to spend an action dealing with this. And if your predator has fortitude, sticking this onto them is a bit easier than trying to get some aggravated damage through.
Yep. And if you're playing sort of a Smalling Jack kind of wallish deck, it's also not that bad to put on your prey, because every single Sculpt the Flesh is 1 extra point of Smalling Jack damage. And I think before we started the podcast, we were having a quick chat, and there was a throwaway comment that you made, which was that they tried to take an action to remove it Just an excuse to block and drop another one.
Yep.
Last but not least, the Borscht of Sophia. This is an ally that requires Tzimisce, so it's fruit action. Costs 3 pull, unique ghoul with 5 life, 3 strength, and 0 bleed. After this ally enters play, burn an ally or retainer you control. This ally can strike 3R damage. It can enter combat with a minion as a directed action. During your unlock phase, you can discard an ally or retainer card, add 2 life to this ally. War Ghoul 2.0 or War Ghoul at home? What do you think?
Interestingly enough, the deck has one copy of this and 2 copies of War Ghoul. So that's 9 pool of allies right there, and hopefully they're not eating each other. So that said, pitching a War Ghoul for VOD's card text isn't too bad.
Clearly, 1 Borscht and 2 War Ghouls means the first War Ghoul is meant to be eaten when the Borscht comes into play, and the second one you pitch to give Borscht an extra 2.
Obviously.
Anyway, it might be worth having a quick look at what's the differences between the Borscht of Sophia and your typical, I say typical War Ghoul because if you're sort of Lord of the World Darkness interests you, the Borscht is essentially a War Ghoul. It's a specific War Ghoul, but a War Ghoul. So, a War Ghoul prevents 1 damage each round and has a special that allows it to lock to burn location. Borscht has the aforementioned ability to gain life when you pitch an ally or retainer, and this can allow the Borscht to exceed its starting life. And of course, War Ghouls are not unique, but the Borscht of Sophia is unique. More relevantly, I think the War Ghoul has 4 strength as opposed to the Borscht's 3 strength, but the Borscht has the ability to strike that 3 damage at range. And while the War Ghoul can only rush vampires, the Borscht can rush any minion.
I think I like the Borscht.
So yeah, the Borscht likes you too. You seen it?
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, maybe you'd run 1 Borscht and a few War Ghouls. I think I just run 2 or 3 Borscht, because that's what I want to come out, and if I draw more, I just pitch it for life.
That is a good point. The Borscht deals with its own uniqueness in a way. So you're never sort of stuck with a Borscht in hand. Having said that, I think typically you won't run a single War Ghoul in a deck, but I would run the Borscht of Sophia as a one-off copy in a slower pace easy deck, one that's not Protean Dominate Bleed.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely consider running a Borscht.
Sure.
And that's all the new cards in this reconstructed deck. Now to have a quick look at the notable reprints. Up is Anarch Revolt. Last printed in 2006, 3rd edition. I think right now, with the number of Anarchs running around, it's probably not the best card. But with the Hector, I think it's independent. I'm wrong. La Sombra, which is going to be Camarilla, and the Sabat set coming up, there is potential that you start to see less Anarch decks, and maybe Anarch Revolt becomes more relevant. Next one up is a recent print. Second printing of it is a Child of the Revolution. This is a card where if you're going to build a deck around it, you're going to need multiple copies of it. And having it in more than one product is a good thing.
Yep.
Next up, Library Hunting Ground. This was last printed in 2019 in the Den of Fiends reconstructed deck with the Sabbath Precons. And then Living Man's, likewise, last reprinted in the Den of Fiends Sabbath Precons. Papillon, again, last printed in 2019 in the Sabbath Precon. I think this was in Element of Shadows. One of the more powerful effects that we've seen with ally decks This is basically there for War Ghouls or Divorced. And this is Piper, as last printed in 2008 in Twilight Rebellion. So that's a good reprint.
But this Piper in particular is an interesting one because it got so very popular until just recently. So I'm sure there was a lot of people looking forward to this reprint. Specifically, it was for Emerald Legionnaire decks to get them out without having to worry about stealth and all that. But that deck's kind of out the window at this point, so I'm not sure what the demand is for Piper is anymore.
I actually looked at Borgles, Borscht, and Piper, and the Emerald Legionnaires. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
Following that, Revenant was last printed in 2006 in 3rd edition. And of course, the card that we've been talking a fair bit about, War Ghoul, also last printed 2006. So that's some of the new cards, some of the new crypt cards, new library cards, and some of the notable reprints. Having looked at the deck, I just want to say again that it is you look at the crypt and the effects that they run, and basically Dominate and Protean. A lot of it requires Superior. So you don't get access to efficient effects like Platinum Protocol or Break the Bonds. Like Invigorate their freeway Anarch card. Like it's not a payload, it's a delivery system. And they still need, and I think you mentioned something about the way their discipline threats are. They do need superior Protean and to a certain extent superior Dom.
If we go back in time about a year or so, where we didn't know what the new cards were going to be, we just knew, oh snap, new Tzimisce have Dominate and Protean together. Or what could they possibly give Tzimisce which wouldn't just make that combination of disciplines insane? And I was thinking, oh, maybe they could go to some weird like flesh crafting angle, do some like ally modification, buffing, give them extra strength or life or some weird stuff like that. That's what I was expecting, but we didn't get any of that. Instead, we get a bunch of plus strength effects. So, yeah, good job. It's not OP, I guess. I mean, so that was the needle they needed to thread, right? What can they give Tzimisce as an identity which doesn't make that combination any worse than it already is? In some way, I guess they succeeded.
I think one of the reasons, or the main reason rather, why we as a community think Protean and Dominate is powerful is because of the Stanislava deck, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it is not necessarily obvious at first glance, or it wasn't to me at least, that the reason why Stanislava and her friends are that powerful is because they're typically high enough capacity to have everything they need at Superior. So you're looking at the best that Protean can offer. I'm not going to say the best that Dominate can offer because Dominate's Dominate, but you're pairing it up with the best that Protean.
The only thing worth playing at inferior in Protean is claws. Just about everything else you're going to want superior Protean.
I think this is also one of the reasons why we think that even though it is a big enough toolbox, it's not really a clear toolbox.
Well, there's a few angles you can take it, right? You've got Dominate, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Dominate's good.
Really?
At that point, okay, do you use some of the new strength stuff to make it a bruise bleed? Or do you just lean into the traditional Protean form of mist angle and just stealth through? Or what was the other option?
Bruce Bleed.
You could go Bruce Bleed, Stealth Bleed, or I guess Wallish, and really lean on the one with the land.
I'm actually not convinced one with the land is something you... I mean, it is an exciting card to try out, but you're probably better off just walling the usual way with, I guess, for lack of a better term, more reliable intercept that doesn't have strings attached. Animalism has a bunch. Has guidance. If you have more of the higher capacity vampires, you can access the Sense the Savage way. If you're...
I look at one with the land as a wake more than it is an intercept. It's an on the quivy which doesn't have the 1 per turn restriction in my eyes.
Yeah, but I mean, if I were to honestly run a Wallish deck, I guess my point is I wouldn't lean on one of the land. And look, this is probably a good deck as any to... I'm going to help you make it happen to run... What's that card? Eye of the Beast?
Eyes of the Beast?
Yeah.
Yes. Yet another missed opportunity for a reprint, but what are you going to do? Yeah, I like that idea of kind of having a wall that builds up over time. You know, try to get permanent intercept here and there. Maybe get an equipment. Maybe get a monstrous form. Maybe get a pack alpha. And then once you've got your strikes for 2 or 3 going, you can get presses from all sorts of places. You could play Eyes of the Beast, Underbridge Strays, Wolf Claws.
Invigorate even, really.
Yeah.
I mean, Invigorate doesn't give you a press, but it is something that...
It combos with presses.
Yeah, works well with presses. You could even play these Headquarters. What it's called?
Mob Connections.
Which one's the press? One of them is the press, the other one's
Mob Connections.
What's the press to continue? What's the press to end? Alright, Mob Connections. There is this other deck that one of the players at my local meta has been playing to fairly good results. It's this deck that leans heavily into the British Museum and the Living Mans. You basically use that as a permanent sort of bleed rather than relying on Govern the Underlying. Deck basically is free to run more stealth than payload. I think having Protean releases a lot of... Having Protean is what gives Tzimisce a lot of these options that they never had before. If you're watching this video, you should already know, and this is old news to you. Form of Mist is really good. Earthbound is really good. And then Protean has all these effects that, like, if you don't want to go into dedicated stealth, but be a little bit more toolboxy, you always have Form of Bat,
Form of the
Serpent, and also Obedient Flesh. So yeah, British Museum, Living Mans. That was an interesting deck.
And I guess when you have a Living Mans, you don't want to be governing.
Well, there are 2 schools of thoughts here.
Sure.
There is that, hey, I'm bleeding you for 4. If you AI me, if you AI this minion, I'm gonna bleed you for 7 with the next 2 minions.
Sure.
Apparently, that is one way to play around Archon Investigation.
Yep.
The other deck that I sort of came to my mind when I was looking through Reconstruct deck was a Wargul deck that, and I think you've mentioned this before, because Wargul decks will always have standard Underbridge Strays, a few copies of Jake Washington, maybe a couple of Pipers, and I also found that there are 3 Giovannis in a legal grouping that have Protean and Dominate. So there is... I haven't quite worked out the details yet because the Warguls eat something on the way in each time. But there is a potential for a recursive Wargul / Watchdog Surveyor kind of...
I'm not convinced that's a good idea.
No? Because of the the Wargul needing to eat something?
No, more that I know Wargles cost 3 pool and don't bleed.
I think outside of, something cute and janky or a toolboxy deck as the creators intended, you're really just looking at Dominate and Protean being a good self-bleed discipline. And there really is nothing wrong just running the deck as a self-bleed.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get distracted with all the weird shit that they included in the precon, but at the end of the day, Govern Form of Mist kind of just
works. I have to say, this is one of the more interesting precon that I have sort of deep dived in. All the other precons that have come so far, I've always been excited about the new cards individually. The cards are exciting, but doesn't make me want to look at the deck and go, oh, hey, what can I really do with a bunch of new vampires and like not focus around a Platinum Protocol, not focus around a Zapatasurus Hot S, not focus around Night Terrors, not focus around Hakim's Law Retribution, not be overly focused on a new card, but be excited about the entire deck. And kudos, I guess, to Black Chantry for making a deck that is exciting to just think about.
Yeah, it really showcases all the different tools that they've given Tzimisce. I don't think they all fit together in this context, but you can definitely pick and choose which ones you want to use.
All right, that's enough about Govern plus Form of Mist. I think we've come to the end of the deck review. Thank you once again, John.
Thank you for having me.
And for our viewers and listeners at home, we hope you found this helpful. And if you think we've missed anything, or if there's something else you'd like to hear on this podcast, let us know in the comments below. The usual, like, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. And until next time, see ya.
Bye-bye.